Hello, everybody. I have an amazing founder here again today, Sunny from Osmosis. Sunny, thanks for taking a moment to check in with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to hear everything, but we have in this crazy event, East Denver, maybe 15, 20 minutes together. So I want to really quickly get into your origin story. How did you take the pill into crypto?
Yeah. You know, there's many stages of like getting into crypto. It's like, when did you first hear about it? When did you first buy your first Bitcoin? When did you jump in full time?
Yeah.
But I guess, first time I ever heard about crypto was, I think, senior year of high school. A friend walks up to me and says, Dogecoin just sponsored the Jamaican bobsled team. And I'm like, what does that mean? None of that sentence made any sense.
Yeah.
And so I had to go home that evening and look up what is Dogecoin. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And then obviously it talks about Bitcoin in there. So I'm like, okay, well, let me look up what is Bitcoin. And I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. And so that kind of was in the back of my mind for a little bit. And then, I get to next year.
At that point, I presume you did know what bobsledding was.
I did know what bobsledding was. Cool Runnings, I think, taught everyone what bobsledding was.
And Elon was not a fanboy of Dogecoin at that point.
No. Dogecoin was this like weird online community of people who just like to tip each other on the Reddit. So I just had that in my mind. I get to UC Berkeley a couple months later as a freshman, and there's like a lot of clubs and stuff. You find out what you want to do. There's this like Bitcoin club, and I'm like, oh, I remember looking up Bitcoin. I was like studying computer science and political economy, and so it was a very obvious interest of the two. So I joined that club. Was very over my head, but I'm like, oh wow, these people seem very smart, so I'm gonna keep showing up. What we started to do was, me and two friends, we decided to teach a class on Bitcoin and like how the technicals work and everything. Because for me, the best way to learn something is to sign up and teach it.
And you were equipped with the opportunity to do that because in Berkeley you can, as a student, teach classes.
Correct. Yes, exactly. Yeah, we have this cool program called Decals. As long as you get, you need a professor to support it and back it. So we had Professor Dawn Song. She works on Oasis now, but she was sort of our backing professor. And we had a lot of students join. I kind of was learning while teaching, but it's, you can get away with that. And with those students, we created a new club called Blockchain at Berkeley, kind of grew that, did a lot of educational and research stuff, a little bit of consulting work.
And kept offering classes along the way.
Kept offering classes.
A class on Rust was first offered in Berkeley, right?
Yeah.
As a result of your work there.
Yeah, so it's really cool. I think that education was one of the most important things of what Blockchain at Berkeley did. Okay, then let's fast forward to summer of 2017.
Okay.
I just started getting interested in Ethereum a little bit. Someone convinced me to check it out, so I started interning at Consensus, just as a way of learning more about Ethereum.
Which domain of Consensus were you at?
It was basically a proto version of the graph. Yeah, so we were building a subgraph system for Ethereum, basically. Nice. So I was doing that, but I don't know, something about Ethereum just never clicked for me. I was still a little bit of a Bitcoin maxi, I think.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this Ethereum stuff seems really cool, but I want to bring value to Bitcoin and do cool stuff on Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But while I was at Consensus, I got super interested in proof of stake. And me and another friend, we just started reading every white paper we could.
Yeah.
And started listening a lot to the Epicenter podcast. And I was like, oh, wow, I'm learning so much from this.
And what was the impetus for the proof of stake? Was it the idea that you could own something and it would be a passive income generating asset? Or what was the appeal for you?
I think it was that you have more levers in which to design incentive systems, because in proof of work, you have a cost. So there's a cost to doing things, right?
Yeah.
But there's no way of punishing bad behavior. Or I guess, the other way around. There's the same cost for both good and bad behavior, and the idea is that the cost will be high enough that we can, it'll only incentivize the good behavior, and doing the bad behavior, it doesn't get accepted.
Yeah.
The nice thing with proof of stake, you have this whole slashing concept.
Yeah.
So you can make the costs for good behavior pretty low. There's some capital cost, but you can make the cost for bad behavior very high by slashing. And it's oh wow, with this, we can actually, that's a lever we can do more interesting mechanism designs with, right? So that was the original impetus for me. And the idea was like, okay, let's, proof of stake allows you to do this with the blockchain, but then you can have the blockchain validators start to do more. Maybe provide oracles, provide some privacy functionality, MPC, all this sort of stuff. And the slashing acts as the stick.
Sure.
You have,
the carrot and the stick.
Yeah, but proof of work only gave you the carrot. Proof of stake gives you a carrot and a stick.
Yeah. Also made it like a hard to get carrot.
Yes.
So there was an implicit, every time you tried it, there was some punishment. But yeah, more direct. It's like incentives and taxes.
Exactly, right. We were reading all the proof of stake papers, and I really liked Tendermint because I thought like, wow, this is very simple and elegant almost.
Yeah.
And we can do it quickly. And I liked the fast finality function of it.
Yeah.
So I reached out to the Tendermint team, and they told me about this Cosmos thing. And I didn't realize when I reached out that, that was like the same team working on Tendermint and Cosmos. But they started pitching it to me, and I'm like, oh, this actually fixes a lot of my issues with Ethereum. Because I really they picked this whole idea of like a world of many app chains and like bridges between them.
Yeah,
and
a standard to do that.
And at the time, Ethereum was very much like, focused on like, oh, we're going to have this one chain to rule them all. Everything's going to be built here. And I'm like, for me, it was like, oh, well, Bitcoin is an app chain. It's just for payments. And if we can bridge Bitcoin off, then we can build applications just like the Ethereum people are, but we can build applications around Bitcoin. Bitcoin will be the asset that will be the money of this whole ecosystem. And that's, I think, what really excited me and why I kind of quit my internship at Consensus halfway through the summer and instead started working with the Cosmos team.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed what I was doing, and then basically come fall, a day before my classes started, I dropped out to work on Cosmos full time.
Yeah, I see. So summer of 2017, what's the gestalt like? Tendermint, Cosmos, you're there coming from an ex-intern from Consensus. What's the ongoing discourses? What are you guys trying to build? What are you guys thinking about at that time? Yeah,
so at the time, I would say I originally came in with a lot of ideas for how to improve the Tendermint consensus protocol. That code base was mostly done. I think the biggest thing that when I jumped in, that's when we just started building the Cosmos SDK. Because the Tendermint consensus engine had existed for a while. That was originally created in 2014.
Yeah.
But now it was and it allowed people to build any state machine in any language they want on top of it. But what we were realizing was building entire state machines from scratch is hard. No, people don't want to write their own
SDK.
Yeah, people don't want to write their own cryptography libraries and hashing function and databases and so. Let's go at SDK. Give a bunch of good, sane defaults, standard implementations of the things that everyone will want: staking, tokens, governance, all this sort of stuff. But you can you can modify it, right? You can go, you don't have to use the defaults that are there.
Yeah.
And so when I jumped in, to be honest, I was probably not the most helpful when I joined. I was barely, just a second year college student. I think the Tendermint team, one thing that they were really good at is just finding young talent, I think. And so, it probably took me 6 to 12 months to actually get to the point where I'm actually contributing back and being helpful. But, I like that they invested that time in me and other people as well, including my co-founder of Osmosis was also part of, he was an intern at Tendermint the following year.
Yeah.
But when we jumped in, really just focusing on the Cosmos SDK, that was the number one focus. And we were trying to ship the Cosmos Hub blockchain.
I see. So your first core product was the protograph in Consensus, then working on the Cosmos SDK.
Yeah.
So that's super helpful. Then let's fast forward a little bit to Osmosis. You get going with Osmosis. What's the vision at the start?
Yeah, so Osmosis started where the first thing that we started with was we really wanted to do something with privacy. And my co-founder, Dave, he's one of privacy experts, right? He did a lot of research on zero knowledge proofs and stuff. And so we're okay, well, with privacy, what is the most practical thing that's the biggest issue right now? And we saw front running. Front running on Ethereum was getting really bad. It was just, not as bad as it is today, but it was just starting to kick off. I was very close friends with the Flashbots team. And so we all were sort of researching this whole MEV issue together. And I wanted to figure out, how do we solve this? And we realized that, the fundamental problem here is there's a privacy breach happening that everyone can read everything in the mempool.
Yeah.
And so if we can bring privacy to the mempool, then that's how we can solve this.
Yeah.
You can't front run if you can't read anymore.
Exactly. You can't make a sandwich if you don't know what's bread and what's...
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we looked at all the different solutions for how to build privacy of the mempool. There's 3 main ones that we realize are possible. There's SGX-based solutions, which has its own set of issues.
Yeah.
Time lock encryption, which has its own set of issues, and threshold encryption.
Yeah.
And out of the 3, we're like, okay, threshold encryption seems to be the one that has the least drawbacks and
and feasible right now.
Yeah. And so we started architecting and building a threshold decryption system using a Tendermint chain. And then we're like, well, what's the application? This is a feature, not a product.
We need something in which we will not allow front running.
Yes, exactly. What should we build? Yeah. Well, actually, funny, before we actually originally were like, at the time, it was hard to explain because there's no terminology around it, but now the terminology would be a shared sequencer. We were like, oh, what if we build a chain that does threshold decryption, and then it allows rollups to execute based off of what's being threshold encrypted here. We were a little bit skeptical whether people would use it or not, whether rollups wanted to use that versus just doing it internally.
Internally being in the layer 1.
In the rollup.
In the rollup.
Yeah. Uh-huh. I guess we expected that the rollups would be more decentralized than they are right now, not these single sequencer ones.
Sure.
That rollups would still be running a consensus protocol like Tendermint, and then still using the rollup system. And we thought that, the rollups are just going to do threshold encryption within their own thing. They're not going to rely on some shared sequencer sort of system. But we were like, okay, let's at least we'll validate it while we're building. Meanwhile, at the same time this is all happening, on the other side of the world, Josh and Tony, they were the creators of the Kepler wallet, which is the main wallet for the Cosmos ecosystem.
Yeah.
They were not sure how to monetize a wallet. This is pre-MetaMask swaps when people realized, wallets are actually extremely profitable.
Yeah.
So Tony started at a hackathon, built the first version of Osmosis, which was a DEX on the Cosmos SDK. And we were connected to Josh and Tony, Dave and I, about hey, why don't we help them out and help them launch this, and it'll be our first they'll be our first customer for our sequencer system.
Yeah.
And so we just started working together, and then we're after working together, we're wait, why don't we just completely just merge? Why are we building the shared sequencer thing at all? Why don't we just focus on the DEX completely and just build a more user-facing product rather than this
So how do you go from the sequencer and wallet and combine them to, in your cognitive map, get to a DEX? What is the synapses that are crossing over that I'm not registering that?
Yes. So basically what happened was, there was the company in Korea, Chainapsis, that built the wallet, and then there was Sika that was our validator company, but we were building threshold encryption. And then we started Osmosis as a joint project. Yeah. So 2 companies, each have 2 products, but one of them was a joint project.
Got it.
And so that's sort of how it started. We eventually just took our threshold encryption stuff, merged it in. Chainapsis still maintains Kepler as well, along with being a core contributor to Osmosis. For us, it was this makes sense because like I said, we were worried about would rollups want to use the shared sequencer? So we're why don't we build our own product so that I think being as close to the user is very important.
Yeah, I hear you. So you went straight to the DEX. What was the vision for a successful DEX at that time, and how has it sort of evolved?
Yeah, so like I said, when we started, it was we want to build the privacy-focused DEX.
Yes.
But
no front running here.
No front running, and then also other sorts of privacy as well, on-chain privacy, because today every DEX, everyone's leaking their entire trading strategies, right? And that's not okay.
Yeah.
So that was the original goal, privacy-focused DEX. But at the same time, Cosmos IBC was just starting to come active, and we're wait, there's an opportunity here, because what we noticed was Cosmos ecosystem assets were there's a lot of Cosmos ecosystem assets. Sure. And they were very high value. I think even today probably, I think the Cosmos ecosystem has the most number of assets second most number of assets in top 200 by market cap other than Ethereum. But at the time, there was very hard to get these assets listed on centralized exchanges because unlike ETH assets, ERC20s, they just have, centralized exchanges just have to integrate one blockchain, just add ERC20s. Yeah. But for every Cosmos asset, they'd have to integrate a new chain. And so it was harder for Cosmos assets to get listed on centralized exchanges. And so we saw like, wait, there's a lot of demand for these assets, but not a lot of like, there's an untapped market here basically.
Yeah.
And so we're like, well, maybe we can launch Osmosis and like tap into this like demand and be like the first killer DEX as soon as IBC goes live.
Right.
And so that's sort of what happened where we were
You were right.
Yeah, we were right. And so we launched and got a lot of traction that way. And then once you've launched a product, then everything changes because like you are now dealing with the demands of the market. I mean, Osmosis was very successful in its early days. I guess you could say we got product market fit from day one of launch. Then
All of us like 4 years of hard work and overnight success.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, so then from there, it was like, kind of figuring out the needs of the market. I guess one thing is like we got very sort of sucked into the Terra supernova effect.
Sure.
Osmosis was like the biggest DEX for UST. And so, that was a market that we're like, oh wow, this is a fast growing market. We're very well positioned to tap into that. Came back to bite us, but I think the whole Terra, we can talk about that if you want. But I think it was actually in the end still very positive for Cosmos as a whole.
Yeah, it showed like, hey, there's a lot of resiliency here. Yeah.
And it's like all the developers and everything, they still stayed in the Cosmos ecosystem. A lot of them are building on top of Osmosis today, or just building other Cosmos chains. Still, our end goal is still to push for a lot of this privacy stuff. It's still like in development. As we started developing it, we realized, there's actually a little bit more stuff that we need to do. Like, we need to add this functionality to the Tendermint consensus, and like, so. But yeah.
Was it a challenge for you to think about? Okay, these are the features. We're going to do superfluid staking. We're going to do account abstraction sessions, what have you, and then try to prioritize or dedicate specific talent to them. How did you realize what you need to do and then actually get around to doing that in a reasonable time frame?
I don't know if this exactly answers the question, but like one of the challenges that we often face is like how do we prioritize things that we find like intellectually cool and innovative versus like things that like are direct demands from the market. Like superfluid staking was like we were really excited by it because we're like this is like an innovative thing that no one has done before.
Yes.
And is it the most like important product facing thing? Maybe. Like, and it's nice because it gives LPs more yield from staking, so you don't have to choose. But at the end of the day, it's not like this makes the trader experience like 10 times better, right?
Yeah.
But I think what was important for us was we wanted to, this is like back when like all the projects you see are just like forks of the same 3 code bases, right? And we wanted to really set ourselves apart and be like, no, look, we are actually able to do like innovative things and
that really built the narrative for how, because you're on an app specific chain.
Yeah, there's an example of we were able to show like this is something we can only do as an app chain and like no one else could do this.
Yeah.
And then there's other things that we've been working on like another one example of that would be like one of my biggest qualms with every existing blockchain today is like you have to have one token to pay your gas fees in, and this is like just the worst UX. And it doesn't make any sense for Osmosis because as a DEX, people are bringing in other assets. Let's say you bring in Atom or ETH or USDC. You don't have any Osmo yet. How can you
pay Osmo?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. So we modified our chain to allow transaction fees to be paid in any token.
And guess what? There's a DEX running there. You might, if you really, really needed to get it to Osmo.
Exactly.
So
we're able to use the Osmosis TWAP price as an oracle for how to weigh these assets, and then we collect all the fees, and then on some regular cadence, the protocol just sells them all for Osmo. So it still provides Osmo buy pressure effectively, and then distributes it to validators.
Yeah, I hear you. This is pointing at the sort of tension between intellectually curious, maybe good marketing versus high value features and how to prioritize them.
Yeah.
So if you're faced with the same situation again in the future, how would you approach that? Like, what's your takeaway?
One takeaway in general is like know when to like drop a project. Like there's oftentimes things that we would there's this tension that we always have, which was like there's a lot of projects who like say they will do stuff and then like don't ship it, or like the timelines never make sense. Like for Superfluid, like we were like we want to like say a date we're gonna launch it and actually stick to it. And like back then I basically said publicly I would shave my head if we don't ship it by that date. And it was like really nice that like we like I don't know, it was important to us to be the team that actually ships when we said we would.
Right.
But sometimes that also turns out to maybe not be the best choice. Where so for example, Osmosis was building stable swaps, and we started building the stable swaps back in April, back when UST still existed, and we're like, oh, we will. We were already the biggest DEX for UST. Let's make sure we have a stable swap so we can be like the UST, USDC primary pool in crypto. And we started working on that due to a number of things, including Terra Collapse and other stuff we had to deal with. The development of that took longer than we wanted, and we shipped it in November. But it didn't have much product market fit at this point because in Cosmos, there's currently one popular stablecoin, which is only USDC, and so it's there's no real product market fit for this stable swap.
There's no reason to swap it for anything else.
Yeah, exactly. And also, it's concentrated liquidity is also our concentrated liquidity implementation is also just right around the corner, and it's to be honest, a little bit unclear what the benefit, how important a stable swap protocol is when you have concentrated liquidity. Because if you look today, actually, Uni V3 is actually quite competitive with Curve, even on stable to stable transactions. So I guess one lesson that we learned was at some point, we were very much in this mode of oh, we said we're building stable swap and we are going to make sure we ship that because that's what we told the community that we would do. But maybe at some point along at that, we should have look back and reevaluate it, especially after the Terra collapse. Wait a second, how important is stable swap? The market clearly something about the market conditions have changed in a meaningful way. We should have reevaluated at that point. Okay, what?
But now it seems like you're in a better position as a leadership group to say, well, we always do what we say. Look, we did it, even when we realized it wasn't necessarily the best because conditions have shifted. Now it gives you cred to say, by April of 2024, we committed to do this, but January comes around and is you know what? Crypto prices are gonna skyrocket. This is not the most important thing right now. Let's do something else. And then I think it was still a good call to.
I think there's trade-offs, right?
Yeah. So. Is there some pain point that took you 3 to 9 months to actually address, find a solution to, that you wish you knew before that you'd like to share with other founders?
Yeah, I mean, so I think that prioritization of make sure when to put things on pause is very important. Another would be definitely make sure you're hiring the best people. So I think maybe we looking back on our experience from Tendermint, like I said, we brought in a lot of early very young people, but I think we had enough more senior people as well that we were able to support that. I think with Osmosis for a while we had too many junior people, not enough very senior people, and that became an issue. So I think it's make sure that you're hiring senior people along with making the bigger bets on these more junior people that you might have a lot of conviction in.
Right.
But without a support system and mentoring system and a way for them to learn, they're not going to be set up for success. So make sure you're balancing those.
Right. So speaking of mentoring system, what sort of good templates? What's a good way to do it?
So to be honest, we're in this process of learning this right now, right? I think, but making sure that people have there's a senior dev that is able to answer questions for more interns or junior devs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So and I guess another thing we learned was separate learning is we're a very remote company. Like I said, we started off Korea and the US, right?
Yeah.
But, at this point, I don't think we have more than 3 people in any one city. So we're just completely geo-distributed. And this,
no meteor can take out Osmosis.
No meteor can take us out, but and it's nice. You can hire amazing talent who live anywhere. We have people in Italy, in Sweden, in Korea, wherever. But it definitely makes it harder to build proper company culture and stuff, and and so I think it's important to do regular team meetups, even if it's for smaller team meetups. For example, we just got back from Taiwan where we did a front end team meeting and just getting that synchronous, just knocking things out. And also, or another one was we did the chain development team met in Berkeley for an entire month, and just not everyone has to come the entire time. Some people they can come the whole month. Some people have families and stuff. But we're come for a week or come for however long you can, right?
Yeah.
And I think that kind of stuff, even if along with just being better for working in person, it also just gives you like the rapport that makes it much easier to work with people online after that. Because now you're actually friends, not strangers anymore.
Makes sense.
And so I think that's really important. And even just doing like
mentorship, in-person meetings.
Yeah, and then like doing like the continent-wide stuff. Like I think part of the problem is like getting everyone in one place is like hard. Just it's expensive, but it's also like jet lag and stuff like knocks out half your productivity. But it's like if you're in the US, why don't we have a bunch of people here meet more regularly, or everyone in Europe, let's meet in one city every like 2 months or something like that.
I hear you. That sounds great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights with other founders in our space. We appreciate you.
Thank you
for being here.